Hello. So I just want to go over what we talked about a little bit on the media group, the Citizens Journalism Group, and
Can you hold the mic?
Sure. And so we spoke about the different ways that we're trying to get the message out, and right now we have a few different things that we're working on. We have The Occupier, which is a newspaper which comes out every 3 to 4 weeks, and we pretty much just chronicle what's been going on in the world of Occupy, and also get some editorial perspectives in there as well, but more so just chronicling what's happened and what events are coming up. Also, we talked about going on local access television and trying to put on shows every few weeks that go over certain topics. Really over a wide range of ideas, but I think it's important to get some sort of broadcasting influence out there, even if it's just on cable, just on local access TV. And also we want to push for some, broadcasting of Democracy Now!, because we think that that's a great resource and people can really get a very good perspective, probably more objective, more, a perspective that we probably have a lot more in common with. And so that's another push for us. And apparently the FEC just recently is allowing groups to broadcast over low frequency radio waves, so we're going to try to get some broadcasting on through radio as well. So I think that's a big thing too. So if you want to check out any of these groups. Yeah, well, a big thing, and I think the most important thing with the media group is to come up with our own form of journalism where we create the content ourselves rather than just relying on the major media networks to cover topics, because frankly they've failed to bring up some of the most important issues that we've had to deal with, whether it's wealth inequality or the influence of money in our political system. And so the idea is to create our own form of media where we hold people, we hold the politicians accountable to facts rather than just allowing them to assert whatever they want to and going unchecked by the media that we currently have, which just has done a great disservice in spreading falsehoods and really allowing people to be in power who shouldn't. So our goal is to produce some sort of media that has some credibility and some grounding in facts. So that's why we're doing this. And I think right now we're coming up with some pretty good methods to get our message out there. Media group meeting on at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays at E5, which I'm not sure where that is, but it's apparently in Chinatown. Harrison Ave. So if you have any interest in contributing to this group, certainly we welcome all to come, and we'll see you there. Please, somebody.
Hi, I'm Steve. I sat through the Organizing 101 presentation, which was given by Grace Morris. One of the interesting things I learned about this, about the act of counting the numbers. So let's say you've got a cause and you petition people and you get people to sign your petition and give you their phone number. So these are people who support what you're doing and they're interested in what you're doing. You're going to have this kickoff meeting and you want to enlist some help so you can make a good showing. And you'd like 50 people to show up. So you get out your list of petitions and you start calling. So in order to get 50 people to show up, you're probably going to have to get 100 people to say that they're going to show up. And in order to get 100 people to say that they'll show up, you're probably going to call 200 people. And in order to get those 200 people that you can call, well, you probably are going to stand up there with your clipboard asking about 400 to 600 people for petitions. So it's, to me, it was a very interesting thing to hear about the numbers game. Doing phone banking to get support if you've got your list of petitions and your list of phone numbers can be a very effective tactic. When you're calling people, make sure that you have a message. Make sure that you can tell them what you're trying to do, how urgent it is, and how they can help. And finally, when you're on the phone, spend half your time talking and spend half your time listening, because a lot of the folks that you'll talk to will have some really good insight that you could use to your advantage. Thank you.
So I was in the discussion group dealing with pesticides and agriviz. So agriviz. This is an issue that, pardon my French, but the practices that are employed in this field are pretty fucked up. I don't have to go through examples, I don't think, but I'm sorry to curse like that, but it does inspire outrage in myself, and I think among many other people as well. So, as far as solutions go, what can we do? We can buy organic food. We can grow our own food. We can know our farmer, know what they're actually using as pesticides, what the practice is that goes into growing that food. We need to somehow get more independent research going. I mean, truly independent research. This is the only way we're going to get actual empirical evidence that isn't biased about the health effects of pesticides, chemicals. Also, there's an interesting thing that came up. I wasn't aware of this, but apparently some time ago, not too long ago, there was a law passed in Massachusetts that made it so communities could not pass laws that would supersede the state law. So, for example, if a community wanted to outlaw a certain pesticide, they can't do that because state law trumps the law. So, in an effort to combat that, another solution suggested was to get the practice of home rule, is what it's called, get the practice of home rule acted in Massachusetts.
The town warrant?
In the
town meeting warrant.
The town meeting warrant, right? There's a resolution being passed among towns. What are the specifics of that?
So, should I?
Ellen's really knowledgeable about this, so have a word.
So for town, we had this idea to do town meeting warrants. So this will not include private property because this is sacrosanct, right, with all this sort of stuff. So the idea was to do these town meeting warrants where we say that, like, I'm from Needham, so in the town of Needham or Lowell or Quincy or Great Barrington, these are the towns I always say because I'm trying to do geographic distribution, but in the town that I live in, we resolve to transition away from using pesticides on our public spaces like fields, town commons, libraries, the berms in front of your houses, which are actually town-owned, and we transition away from using pesticides on the town-owned and managed properties. So it just becomes a community resolution, sort of like a transition town kind of resolution. And if you're interested in signing up to see the wording that we are still working on, or have any ideas how that wording should go, it will probably have to be individual within each town, but it's just a community best practices resolution is really what it is. It's not a ban, but it's saying this is how we're going to deal with our town property. So that's a resolution, and there's also one going on in New Hampshire that could come to Massachusetts about GMOs. So these are two related issues. So if you are interested in the town warrant issue, please talk to me. And then we will also be eventually working on some town Massachusetts state laws about pesticides in the future. So I'll hand it back to Mark.
I think that about wraps it up. And I think I'm forgetting the big one, that the reason why we're here today. We should get money out of politics, and hopefully things will go right from
The other
that.
thing, the Monsanto connection.
Oh, the revolving door idea?
Yeah, there's a couple of diagrams in the back there. Teresa did a great one about Monsanto and how all these officials in Bush, Clinton, and Obama, Monsanto to the administration to Monsanto, and back and forth.
If anybody didn't hear that, there are some great pictorials at the back that show the revolving door between Monsanto and government and just how that plays out.
We can't talk about agribusiness without talking about the 10 billion animals that are living and dying today in confined animal farming operations. And the best way to reduce agribusiness power is not to eat meat or dairy products. So that is, let's not forget that. And it's the reason why the wolves have been delisted from the Endangered Species Act. So keep that in mind.
Hello, quick report back from the Super PACs and Super PACs breakout group in the first session. So we talked about, I'll just give you the quick bullets, how Super PACs target already disillusioned voters, and they make it much less likely that someone who's sort of on the fence about having faith in our political system is going to come out and vote through negative advertising. So it reduces the turnout for competitors. It's not a productive force in democracy. It's really a negative force. That's how it works in our democracy. We talked about the difference between super PACs and PACs. You know, kind of super PACs being the sort of modern, swanky, super effective, and super unregulated version, and PACs exist, but I think there's some regulations that affect PACs from older legislation that don't affect super PACs. And we talked about, you know, the different, we used a graphic from a Mother Jones, a recent Mother Jones that Laura had drawn up on a poster to go through the ways in which people with money who want to contribute to political campaigns can contribute in a variety of ways. Depending on how secretive they want to be, depending on how much they have, obviously. It's a great thing. I recommend checking it out. We also discussed sort of the principle of money and the political sphere and whether it has any place in politics. And we got into an interesting sort of conversation about what does it mean to be trying to limit and not abolish money in politics ethically, and whether whether it's an unrealistic or super idealistic approach, which one's more effective, for instance. There was some interesting discussion about that. And that's the kind of discussion that obviously would need to continue, and there was no concrete conclusion. And you know, so there's sort of two kind of models. One would be, you know, to limit gross contributions, or like over the top amounts of money. The other one would be, you know, to say that people, Americans, or globally, we need to realize that democracy is something that should be free of the influence of money, and is more of a consciousness revolution, where it would become taboo to discuss money and politics based on people's understanding of what politics is supposed to do for us. And by politics, I mean democracy, excuse me. Okay, we talked about the way that democracy, the way that free markets provide some version of democracy. We also talked about limiting money in politics. How can you limit money in politics if money is regarded in our society as protected speech? And that the conclusion we came to was, you know, the Lessig's proposal about the constitutional amendment that would change the definition of money as not being, money no longer being a form of free speech is really necessary if we're going to try and limit the amount of money. Then we sort of ended by talking about what caused each of us to come out tonight in the snow, this morning rather. It's almost evening now, right? And what activated us, what specific events caused us to be activated and to really care about this issue and to be willing to invest our time and our energy, sort of told our personal stories. And it was interesting. So that's my report.
Are there any other breakout groups that wanted to do reports? Okay, so we're ready for the next program. And can everyone gather? We're going to have our last learning and choosing the topics that interest you most, going to the breakout groups, discussing things, digesting things, coming up with solutions. And now it's time to try to bring that all together to be able to take action on it. We're going to have a training workshop in citizen lobbying. And that is going to be led by Grace Ross. And we're going to have breakout sessions after that. And we are going to be assisted by two of the states, or Boston's greatest lobbyists, citizen lobbyists, that is, the good ones. And that would be Pam Wilmot and Avi Green, who are going to take us into 3 very large breakout sessions afterwards, where we can practice what we would do when it's time to actually, do the lobbying and speak to people. So let me introduce Grace Ross. She's been a longtime activist for independent politics, economic and social justice. And in her 2006 gubernatorial campaign generated a large-scale grassroots response and modeled that politics need not be business as usual. I'm going to cut the intros a little short, so due to time. Avi Green is the executive director of Mass Vote. He's well known to almost everyone in the state. And wait a minute, well, that's not true. As he's a community organizer, has fought for racial justice and against big money power in politics since 1996. Pam Wilmot is the executive director of Common Cause, and as I like to introduce her, she's everywhere all the time. And she's involved in many reform and consumer environmental issues over the last 20 years. And let's just give it to Grace. You gonna need that? Because you want the podium?
Well, I'm not sure. We'll see how this evolves. I want to really encourage folks to come on down, because this is participatory, and it will be more useful if we can all hear each other. The idea with this piece of the work was that we wanted to really talk about how would you go speak to an elected official about whatever the thing is that you care the most about, and there's been some really, really good sharing. I think people in this time in our history are feeling pretty hopeless about our ability to impact policy stuff the higher up we get. And it's understandable, right, when we talk about the 1% and how much power they have in government. In many ways, Citizens United, to me, it was just sort of like the tip of the iceberg, the noticeable thing. But as somebody who's worked in the foreclosure crisis, it's been really obvious the ramp up of the banks getting more and more and more control over all policy level worth of stuff, and there's no way that what they did could have happened if they hadn't already changed the playing field, sort of changed the policy rules. But what I wanted to start with, because I think it's important as we think about lobbying, I know folks have talked about a bunch of different initiatives of different kinds at different levels of government today. But I wanted to ask a couple of things first. How many folks have actually lobbied an elected official? How many folks have already done it? About half the room. Okay. And for the topics that folks talked about today, the obvious one is Citizens United, so I'm going to put that aside. But for the other topics that folks just reported on, is there somebody who wants to say, if I was going to go lobby somebody, the thing I would most want to go lobby them about is X? I just want like 2 or 3 popcorn to get a sense of what's out there. Yeah.
Agricultural rights.
Agricultural rights, okay.
Humane farming and protection for animals in commercial agriculture.
Okay, yep.
I am a registered lobbyist, and I advocate for consumer protection laws.
You want to choose something a little narrower for me?
Bank fees.
Bank fees, okay. All right, hold on.
Right to collective bargaining.
Right to collective bargaining, okay. What's back here?
Oh, me.
Yes.
Hey, let's be big. Banning pesticides from the planet.
Banning pesticides from the whole planet, okay?
I do medical marijuana.
Medical marijuana. Okay, so these are a lot of different kinds of things that, of course, policies are written about. But they did that great power analysis thing earlier and chose a city council president to focus on. My question before that as an activist is always, so who has the power to change the thing that I want to change? And there's sort of three types of power. There's who's making the policy. So you need to think about, you know, is it not just for resolutions where we're trying to gather public interest, but who's actually changing the laws that affect what I care about? And those laws can get changed not only by who passes something, right, but by how a court interprets it, which is what Citizens United has gotten us tangled up in. But it also depends on who implements the law. Like in Massachusetts, we passed uniform billing in healthcare, which would require, instead of 50,000 different kinds of billing for healthcare, one system. They were going to use the Medicare system because almost every healthcare provider deals with that system. It was passed 2 years ago with great fanfare. It would probably save us more money on healthcare costs at the state level than anything short of single-payer healthcare. It was never implemented. So implementation can be as important as passing a law, and then there's the question of who regulates those laws. And the banks wouldn't have gotten away with what they did if the regulators hadn't all turned a blind eye to everything that was going on. So when we think about changing laws, it can happen in a lot of different places. So why don't we take banning pesticides worldwide? Where'd she go? Okay, so just to start from there, if you wanted to ban pesticides worldwide, who are the policy decision makers on that? God? Yeah, I haven't figured out how to lobby God yet. Other people are probably more expert in that.
The WHO might be a place to start.
The WHO, okay. Who else might have an impact on that?
The UN.
The UN, yeah. That's what you said? Well, every country has policies about this. They're all players in the World Trade Organization, right? So in theory, any country that regulates its own pesticide use could be a target, right? The national government of any of those places. Where else could you have an impact on pesticide use in terms of policies? EPA, state level, DEP in Massachusetts probably could have a say in that. Where else?
In some states on the municipal level.
And arguably it was interesting listening to that conversation because the thing that municipalities in Massachusetts have control over is health and safety. So it would be interesting to start passing something and let the companies sue the city for passing something, and they can argue whether they have a right to protect the health of their people or not. Yeah?
You want the AMA as an ally.
So that's an organization you might want to lobby. So you'd have to think about who are the decision makers in that organization and who determines who those decision makers are and who gets to lobby those decision makers. So the skills we're going to talk about right now could be applied at any of those levels around ending pesticide use around the world. And as somebody who's lobbied at the city, state, federal, and UN level, it's not that different. You have to figure out, you know, who the players are, who's responsible to you as an elected official, so who are you a constituent of, and then figure out how that body makes decisions, how you put in a bill or a piece of legislation or a policy that you want to have passed, and how you're then going to talk to them. But that nice little power analysis thing, if you spent a lot more time on it, you could pull apart in terms of your campaign to end pesticides around the world. You could do that power analysis for each of the players that people named and think about how could you get in? Where do you know people? Where do your friends know people? How do you find the folks who might already be working on elements of that inside of those institutions? Somebody said the AMA. I bet that there is an interest group inside the AMA already working on the impact of pesticides. So. Actually, in an institution that large, I don't know you, but I'll bet you an ice cream right now that there exists such a lobbying group inside the AMA.
Oh, to make sure pesticides are still there?
No, to try and get rid of them. They may be small, but they're there. It's a really interesting thing in my experience when you wander into areas where you assume no one's with you, there is almost always somebody behind the scenes that's already concerned about the thing you're concerned about. And this is one of our big challenges. If we're used to working from the outside and building people power from the outside, working inside of institutions can feel like the power is already stacked against you and it's impossible. But remember, women got the vote when they couldn't vote, right? Civil rights laws were passed when mostly folks in the South who cared the most about those laws could not vote in practice. I mean, in theory they could vote, but in practice they couldn't. So overwhelmingly, anytime we fought for something that mattered for our rights, we were on the outside, and there were some folks on the inside who got convinced. And together with our outside pressure and a few folks on the inside, we got what we needed. So no matter how hopeless or big or impossible or monolithic the insiders might seem, they're a very diverse group of people. And at any one time, there are a few of them who are concerned about the same thing we're concerned about. So,
I owe you an ice cream.
Okay, so, and I was not basing it on trying to prove anything. I'm just saying that this is our experience. If there's a great quote that says, all battles are first won in the imagination. The place that we get colonized first, that we're not even aware of, is the ways in which our belief in what's possible, our willingness to imagine what we want, has already been taken away from us. So I strongly encourage you, even if you do it from a place of rebel resistance within yourself, to always reach for the possibility that there's somebody on the inside who may not even be willing to open their mouth because they're more scared than you are, but who's on our side. We've got to find them, we've got to cultivate them, and this is one of the things when you lobby folks, you need to think about, because the person you're talking to may be that person. They may not have opened their mouth yet, but they may be the person who already agrees with you. So this is one of these places where we have to break down a culture of fear that we've been living under for at least 15 years, where we've been taught the stranger is somebody to be scared of and might be our enemy. In fact, the stranger is part of the 99% most of the time, and they're already on a lot of ways on our side. So part of our battle to create the change we want to create is for us to refuse to buy the dominant paradigm that says we can't trust each other, we're alone, we're powerless, we're the only ones who feel this way, whatever. And when you're lobbying, you're going to be up against that a lot. The first set of folks we talked, the reason Helene really asked me to come was because I was one of the folks who taught folks to lobby when we were fighting to get an objection filed to the 2004 presidential vote. And folks who'd never walked into the halls of Congress, and if you've been to the State House, it is a very unintimidating piece of cakewalk compared to walking through the halls of Congress. It's very intimidating. And part of what you have to do is to not let those buildings take your voice away when you get inside them, and not let your concern about the fact that many of the people there, yes, are getting their meal ticket paid by your enemy, but if you let that be your consciousness when you walk in there, it's going to be very hard for you to get what you want. I'm going to say just a couple more things because I probably ran over my time. One thing that I wanted to do is show folks how to find who your elected officials are. I'm going to do that as the last thing before I hand the mic over to whoever wants to add a couple of thoughts after I'm done. But the other thing I wanted to say about lobbying is when you go to lobby, traditional lobbyists, and I apologies to those here who may be lobbyists by profession, but my experience as somebody who came at this from that world of organizing is that a lot of lobbyists think in terms of who's in leadership that we have to impact. And if you think about any of the activism we do, we have a tendency to name who we see as our opposition, who's powerful. We don't always name to ourselves who are our allies, who are maybe less in a seat of power, but who have real impact. The same often happens with lobbying. When I go up to lobby on something in Massachusetts, I've mostly worked at the state level, I think of it as there are 400 votes in that building. And if 200 votes in that building. And if I have 101 votes lined up, public, ready to support what I'm working on, that means the leadership has to pay attention, right? a lot of lobbyists try and just track who's the leader on a particular committee or who makes up a particular committee. But because I believe this is supposed to be a democracy, and if you think things are unfairly controlled outside, you get inside some of these buildings of government, they've got their own little control scene going on. It's easy to fall into the trap of feeling like it's the folks in charge that get to make all the decisions there. But it's the same trap we're fighting when we go in and say we're people, they should listen to us. Their leadership needs to start listening to the whole body. So I tend to lean in the direction of you lobby every single person you can get to, you get constituents to talk to every single person you can get to, and when you have enough momentum, the leadership has to follow. And it's been interesting because as somebody who's mostly been doing this recently around the foreclosure crisis, in the middle of our legislative discussion, the leadership changed hands. And the folks who were kind of not on the same path we were on politically had put all their eggs in the basket of the existing leadership, and when the leadership shifted, all of a sudden we had way more power inside of the State House, but it's because we had just been lobbying as if it was a democracy. And there are 200 votes there, and we need 101 of them. So I just offer you that because that is not the traditional lobbying model, but I think it fights for our values that says, this is a democracy, they're supposed to be a democracy, and we're going to behave that way until it becomes true, and it's by behaving that way that we make it the reality. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm going to do a quick exercise just because I don't know if folks know how to find your elected officials, and it's helpful, but do you know if the website's up? It's where I vote.
Thursday.
It was, so it may not be up.
And if it's down, it's worthy of protest.
I assume the reason it's down is because of the redistricting.
I don't know, but it's been down since December.
Well, that's not such a good excuse. So there is a way in Massachusetts to find out your elected officials all the way up, and this is it. wheredoivotema.com. And see, it says temporarily unavailable. What you would do, if this is working right, is you would go to where I just put my little cursor here, who are my elected officials, and what would come up is a screen that you type in your address, and it will send you back a drop-down menu. It does tell you where to vote, which is why it's called Where Do I Vote MA. But the rest of what it tells you is all your elected officials, up from your municipal leaders who are your elected officials at the municipal level. It will give you Mass General Court, and if you don't know, that's the name of our legislature, is the Massachusetts General Court. And you'll get your rep and your senator, your congressperson, your U.S. senators, and the president. So I'm sorry I can't show you, but this is where it is. Go find it. Keep it in your back pocket. What I always say to people is, when I ran for governor in 2006, I was the only one who wasn't a multimillionaire. What most folks don't know was the folks I was running against at the end, the names that were on the ballot, I was the only one who was not in the top 0.01% of the United States. I was the only one who was not one of the 14,000 richest people in the United States. I assure you that when people go to their fundraisers and they pay, we were just checking a federal elected office, the top you can give is $2,500. I assure you that the folks who do that have the phone number of the elected official who they gave that money to in their phone. And when they want to say something to that person, they have no qualms about picking up the phone and doing it. So I strongly encourage you, when you can get to the website, to get the phone numbers of the elected official every way up and down, and believe that they represent you as much as they represent the person who gave them $2,500, or in Massachusetts, $500 per year, plus your spouse's $500. And this last time around, through some not legal shenanigans, they had folks give to the governor, the running mate, and the state party. So that person who gave $5,500 certainly felt entitled to call the governor's office whenever they had a feeling about something. Put it in your phone, figure out if you want to, end pesticides across the world, what you're going to call each of them with a message about. You read something in the paper you don't agree with, and you know whether it's your city official, your state official, or the feds, you start calling them and treat them just like you would if you felt as entitled as the folks who give them $2,500 a year, because they work for you just as much as they do for the person who gives them $2,500 a year. Thank you.
we're going to be moving to some breakout sessions where you get a chance to practice your pitches. So Avi and I are going to be really, really brief. I've been lobbying for almost 30 years, a long time, and there's just a very few things that I think are important to pass on. One is that elected officials see a lot less of you than you think. A very small number of people take the time to call, to email, to go see them. And so they appreciate it when you come. And a related point that Grace also really did a great job in emphasizing is they are people. And you share more in common with them than you have differences. And that is true regardless of their ideological perspective. Relate to them on that level and find what you have in common, and you will get through. I mean, I have worked with some really, people who are reprehensible in some of their views, but gotten past reforms or connected with them on things that we can work together. And that's how we build bridges, and that's how we make change. And the third piece is just to be passionate about what you believe in, but know the facts and figures, know what you're talking about, be able to make a cogent argument, and that's what we're going to be doing in a minute. Thanks.
Thanks, ma'am. So I'll be very quick as well. My name's Avi Green. I work over at Mass Vote. So the point that I want to make in lobbying is that lobbying is very, very similar to recruiting or to persuasion more generally. If you want someone to come to a party and they're already your friend, it's pretty easy to do. If you want someone to come to a party and you don't know them at all, it's kind of awkward, right? Yeah, but it's easier if you have something in common with them, right? You go to the same school, you live in the same neighborhood, they're your neighbor from your block, there's something that you can say, right? That makes it a lot easier. With elected officials, sometimes they seem to be very far away, and I want to go ahead and say sometimes they really are pretty far away. They're living in a different world. But the act of persuasion is the same, right? And so in the same way as if you really, really needed $100 right now, right? Like if you really needed it, you send an email to a bunch of random strangers asking them for $100, you wouldn't get it. Maybe someone would give you $5. Maybe if you had 10,000 people on the list, you might get a little bit, right? If you had 100,000 people on the list, but if you needed $100 in cash right now, what I would suggest that you would do is turn to the person in this room that you know the best, right, and ask them. And that would be even more effective, obviously, than you could call someone, right? You needed $100. You could call someone if you needed it, right? And calling would be more effective than emailing, of course, because you put someone on the spot and they have to respond, yes or no. They're on the phone with you. But it's less powerful than when you're able to just say, like, Lenny, it's really good to see you today, and I have a problem. I have an urgent need. We need to raise some money to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment. We're trying to get our online website online to get petition signatures. It's critical, and they're going to turn it off tomorrow unless we're able to put together $100. Can you help out?
Well, I was going to say no because I really am kind of broke right now, but this is something I really care about. So yeah, I'll do my best. Yeah.
So thanks, Eleni. So I'm not going to actually take her money, but I just want to make this. I know I will. All right, I will later. But I want to say one quick thing about that, right? There's a couple things that happened that helped. One, I already knew who she was. The first time you visit your elected official is the hardest, right? The second, I asked her for something very specific. The third is, I gave her reasons why it mattered, okay? Now, if she still wasn't convinced, what's the second thing that I'm going to do? The second thing is, I'm going to get another friend, and I'm going to I'm going to say, Sarah, could you go over to Helene and also ask her for that $100, right? Because unlike money, which we can get from anybody, right, or petition signatures, which we can get from anybody, in the case of lobbying, we can only get that decision from these decision makers. So it starts with moving up this ladder, right, where emails are the bottom and they help just a tiny bit, and phone calls are a little bit better. And then visits in person or the brass ring, and you're not just moving yourself up the ladder, but you're moving as many people as possible up that ladder with you. How many emails does it take for a state representative to freak out and think that something like really, really matters? I would say about 50 in a week. We'll flip them out. Flip them out. Right? They govern about 4, if those 50 are for people in their district. A member of Congress, on the other hand, you probably need several thousand. But a state representative, a state senator, 50. If you get 10 people to go and visit them, they're like, wow, this is big and important. And then if you follow up in a professional way, sending them a thank you and calling them on it, you're going to make progress over time. It's really, it's easier to explain. It's easy to explain, and it's relatively easy to do. What it really takes is a lot of persistence, organization, and motivation over time. So I'm really looking forward to working with y'all on it.
Okay, so you need to make 3 groups, so could you just make a group here, make a group